In this lesson, we are looking into Pure 1, Chapter 4, where we look into graphs and transformations. In the previous chapters, you would have learned about some GCSE recap. You learned about quadratics, disguised quadratics, sketching quadratic graphs, and also, quadratic modeling. Then in Chapter 3, you looked into simultaneous equations, etc. So in this lesson, we look into graphs and transformations of expressions that has a higher power than just quadratic. So in 4.1, we'll look at cubic graphs, and then 4.2 quartic, 4.3 reciprocal, and then 4.4 points of intersection. Now, and then 4.5 to 4.7 is about transformation of graphs. You would have learned a little bit of it from GCSE, so hopefully you do remember some knowledge from GCSE that will help you a little bit easier to get through this chapter. Right. Before we start, also mention this chapter, you will see usually one or two questions each year in exam paper because there are two pure paper by the end of year 13 that you'll be completing. There usually be one or two questions, if you're lucky, two questions on transformations. So you will have to remember them. Right. Without further ado, let's have a look. 4.1, cubic graphs. So these are some sort of terminologies that you might want to learn them. So monomial. So monomial is simply means one term. Expression with one term, e.g. Okay, so expression with one term, e.g. 3xy, x, or maybe x squared, 4x squared. These are monomial, one term, expression with one term. Binomial, bi means two, right? So two terms. Example. Example, we have 2x plus 3y squared, 4x plus 3x. Now, is that binomial? Even though there are two terms in here, 4x plus 3x, but actually they could be combined into one. So technically, you can argue it's binomial, but just for argument's sake, I'll put a squared in there, so it makes it not it makes it definitely not a monomial, but a binomial. Okay. Polynomial. Polynomial means expression with greater than two terms. So anything more than two terms are called polynomial. The degree of a polynomial, so polynomial means an expression with more than two terms. For example, x squared plus 5x plus 6, or xy plus 3x plus, I don't know, let's say sine x, just to make it a bit more interesting, sine x. These are called polynomial, or, because there are more than two terms. The degree of a polynomial with one variable is the largest power in a polynomial. So degree means the largest power in a polynomial. So we start from the bottom. Linear expression. Linear expression means anything with the biggest power of 1. So x minus 6 or x plus 6. Quadratic expression. Quadratic. So it goes up by one power. So x squared plus 3x plus 1. Cubic. Power 3. X cubed plus 4x squared plus 5x plus 1. Quartic. The biggest power. So 3x maybe to the power 4 plus 3. That's a quartic. Even though we don't have the middle term, we know we don't need to include any middle terms. Like quadratic, sometimes you see a weird quadratic like x squared minus 1 to 1. That's a quadratic, even though there's no middle term. So quartic, as long as the biggest power of the expression of the polynomial is 4, actually this is a binomial, is 4, the biggest power is 4, then we call it a quartic expression. Polynomial with degree of 5, you can make it up, x to the power 5 minus 3x to the power of 2 minus 6, x degree of 6, so 2x to the power of 6 plus x cubed plus x minus 5. Now remember, it's just one variable in here, so we don't mix it with x and y. It's just a single like quadratic, there's only one variable, which is x. Right, so hopefully that it should be fairly straightforward. The degree basically means the biggest power. Right, so there are some basic steps you need to know how to sketch a graph. You would have learned this in chapter 2 about sketching quadratic graphs. Speaking of quadratic graph, actually, I've got a little side knowledge for you. Does anyone know why does quadratic, now quad normally means 4, quadrilateral, right? Normally means 4. So why is quadratic means 2? in here. Now, quadrilateral means 4 because quad actually comes from Latin. It comes from the word, I can't say Latin, so I'll just use the English pronunciation for the Latin word quadrus. Okay, quadrus means square. So that's why when you say x squared, y squared, it's called quadratic because quadrus means square. Well, anyway, let's get back to the lesson. Basic steps to sketch a graph. Again, you've learned in chapter 2, which is the first step. So you will need to determine the shape of the graph, right? Step 2. Step 2, which is you need to let x equals 0 to find the y-intercept. Next step, you need to let y equals 0 to find the roots, aka the x-intercepts. Okay, it's like you're saying tomatoes in England. No one say tomato in England. It's same as we don't say x-intercepts, we say roots. Okay, and the last step, the easiest one, sketch. Example, sketch a graph of y equals x squared plus 5x plus 6. This one, you should have learned this. If you know this, you can do them. Again, you don't always have to listen to my explanation. Skip it if you've got it correct, I'll just go for it. So step 1, again, shape. So the shape, we know is quadratic. Positive x squared means U shape. When x equals 0, when x equals 0, then y equal to 0 squared times 5 times 0 plus 6, which is 6. That means the y-intercept is 6. Next, when y equals 0, now 0 equals x squared plus 5x plus 6. If you have a calculator, again, you can use the solve button, polynomial, to solve the quadratic, or you can do it manually, factorizing quadratic formula, or even completing square if you're looking for a challenge. But I'm not going to go through in detail. So x equals -2 or x equals -3. So these are the roots. Okay, remember that. So these are the roots. So we can then sketch a graph quite easily. -2 or -3 means the two roots are going to be on the negative side of x. A positive y-intercept means like that. Now I tend to sketch it first, then I put the numbers in. That will be a lot easier than putting numbers there because then you're confining where you can draw them. People who have really good art talent, like me, really, really good art talent, okay, how I draw a person is this. That's a person. Okay, that's the best person I could draw. It looks quite handsome as well. Is this. So you can imagine, I usually draw a shape, draw a graph first. I plan ahead where the numbers are roughly are, and then draw it and then put the numbers in. All right, that's a little tip for you. So have a go, practice question 1, 2 question. Pause the video, have a go. When you're ready for the answer, you can press play. Here are the answers for question A and B. The shape, when x equals 0, the y equals 0. So I've shown you both. The shape for puppy is N shape because if you try to expand it, you'll get a negative x squared term. All right, so let's move on. Hopefully you don't have any issue. If you have any issue, go back to chapter 2.6 maybe, or 2.5, or 2.4. I can't remember. But anyway, so one about sketching quadratic graphs. Right, so next, actually, let's go to the main dish for today's lesson, which is about cubic graphs. So the notes for cubic graphs are if the A term, so where's the A term? I like to use this method called color coding. So you can see the color coding. I highlight the A in here. So I highlight the A in here means they are relevant. So if the A is positive, a plus V means positive. Learn to write abbreviations in maths because mathematicians are lazy. And that's why we have so many symbols, right? So if A is positive, then shape is going to be like this, okay? If A is negative, then the shape is going to be like this. Right, so we start from the top. So the way you remember is now with quadratic, you start, if positive, you start with like U. If negative, we start from an N. So if positive for quadratic, you start from the top, but for negative, you start from bottom. For cubic, the other way around. If positive, you start from the bottom. If it's negative, you start from the top. Okay, so there are different ways you can remember it. Right, so example here, cubic. So basic one, sketch a graph of y equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 3x. So step 1, shape. We know the coefficient of x cubed is positive. So positive x cubed means the shape is going to be like this. All right. Next, when x equals 0. When x equals 0, y equal to 0 cubed minus 2 times 0 minus 3 times 0. Use your mental maths or the calculator just to make sure you get 0. Next, when y equals 0. When y equals 0, 0 equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 3x. Now, in this question, a cubic question, you can see we can factorize x quite easily. So we can factorize x. So x squared minus 2x minus 3. Then we're left with a quadratic. Then we can factorize a quadratic. Don't forget the x in the front. Then we can factorize the x. That will give you x plus 1, x minus 3. Okay, so therefore, we've got 3 brackets equals 0. So imagine there's a hidden bracket in here. So we've got 3 roots. So the roots are x equals 0, x equals minus 1, or x equals 3. Therefore, when we sketch a graph, it's going to look like this. Right, so we've got the 3 roots, 0, minus 1, and 3. That means 0, we've got a point in there. We've got a point in minus 1. We've got a point in positive x-axis. And we know the shape, start from bottom, going up, come back down, going up. So go up, come back down, go up. So that's minus 1, 0, and 3. The y-intercept is 0, which makes sense. So y and x. Now, when you sketch graph, use a pencil. Okay, use a pencil for the practice question. Okay, so practice question 2. Oh, yes, because question 1 is the quadratic, isn't it? So practice question 2. Pause the video, have a go at the question. This one has been factorized for you. So pause the video, see if you got it right. When you're ready for the answer, you can press play. Here are the answers for practice question 2. So the shape, when x equals 0 is 6. When y equals 0, we've got 3 roots in here. So it is what it is. Minus 2, 1, and 3. Make sure you put numbers in the correct order. Moving on. Now, what if we have repeated root in cubic graph? What does that mean? Let's have a look. So we'll do the same thing, okay? So sketch a graph. Step 1, shape. So it's a positive x cube. So we know the shape is going to look like this, right? Next, when y equals 0, no, you can make y equals 0 first, doesn't really matter. When x equals 0, then y equals to 0 squared minus 1 times 0 minus 1. Essentially, that's 1. When y equals 0, okay, then 0 equals x squared minus 1 times x minus 1. 2 brackets multiply give you 0, so each bracket equals 0. On the left-hand side, we have to solve it. X squared equals 1. When you square it, you have plus and minus 1. This one is just x equals 1. So overall, x equals to minus 1 or 1. Now, 1 is a repeated root because you can see we've got 1 on the left bracket. We'll also get a positive 1 on the right bracket. So 1 is a repeated root. So now, better in mind, we know the y-intercept is 1 and the roots are minus 1 and 1. 1 being repeated. So 1 being repeated. So minus 1 and 1. What it means is we still start from the bottom because the shape tells us we're going to have this shape in here. So we go here, go down. Now, if we go down through the x-axis, you realize there's no point that we can go up and turn back up because we need another root. So what it means is when you have a repeated root, we're going to touch and turn. Okay, so 1 and minus 1 is 1. So when you have a repeated root, okay, when you have a repeated root, the key skill in here is the repeated root means touch and turn. Remember this, touch and turn when you have a repeated root. Okay, so wherever it's repeated, wherever we touch and turn. All right. Okay. Right. So if you're happy with this, then pause the video, have a go at this question 3. Be careful with the shape. Okay. Pause the video, have a go at the question. When you're ready for the answer, you can press play. Here are the answers. Okay. It's a negative x cubed because when you expand this quadratic, you get x squared. But when you multiply by this negative x, you get negative x cubed. So therefore, the shape is going to be the other way around. When x equals 0, you put in a calculator, you get y equals 2, which is the y-intercept. Now, in y equals 0, if you haven't, if you don't realize, where's a repeated root, there's a square. Means actually, there are altogether 3 brackets, 2 minus x, x plus 1, and x plus 1. But a square, so a square means both of them, they're two of the same answers. So x equals minus 1 being the repeated root. So we sketch a graph. It's a minus 1, so we touch and turn. Then we go up and come back down. All right. So if you do correctly, they should all go through the numbers that you've done so correctly. You've calculated. Right. Last but not least, the last situation, which is about triple root. So sketch a graph of y equals minus a negative x minus 1 cubed. So same step, shape. Maybe you can tell me what shape it is. Oh, actually, you can't because I won't be able to hear it. So x minus 1 cubed. Now, if you ignore the minus, okay, if you ignore the minus for a bit, okay, if you ignore the minus for a bit, when you expand this bracket, you get x cubed plus da 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 da. But when you multiply the negative into the x cubed, you get negative x cubed. Therefore, so negative x cubed, the shape is going to be like this. Next, when x equals 0, then y equals to negative times 0 minus 1 cubed. Make sure you plug in the calculator very, very carefully with the signs and the brackets in the correct position. You should get y equals to positive 1, just 1. I put a plus in here just to emphasize the positivity that I have. Just kidding. When y equals 0, then 0 equals to negative x minus 1 cubed. We multiply both sides by negative, which is simply x. The negative just disappears. Now, cubed means triple root. That means if you have to write out in full, this one essentially becomes 0 equals to x minus 1 times x minus 1 times x minus 1. So therefore, x equals 1 is a triple root. Therefore, it's a triple root. Okay. Now, how do we draw the triple root when x equals 1? So when x equals 1, let's say 1 is somewhere here, let's say, okay, we need the y-intercept to be a positive 1. So what it looks like is we have to start from the top. The shape tells us that we have to start from the top, okay? So we start from the top, from a negative, top left, come down to 1 in here, and then, oh, actually, sorry, let me try again. So 1, and then we touch that point and then go. So let me draw it properly again. That's why I asked you to use a pencil. Now, that's why I'm saying I don't like to draw the point first. I like to draw the curve first, and then, so let me try again, okay? Use a pencil. You can use a pencil in the exam as well. Just make sure you bold it. So when the scanner go through, he can see what you drew. So it'll be like this. Still not good enough. Yeah, that's better. That's 1. That's 1. It's a triple root. So the triple root, that's a triple root. So x and y. So in the triple root, the key phrase to remember, so for double root is touch and turn. For triple root is just linger. And change direction. Linger and change direction. Okay, so linger and change direction. So you can see in here, we linger a little bit. We linger around 1 a little bit. So we linger a little bit and then we go down. Right, then we change direction. Okay, right. So next one. Your turn. Pause the video. Have a go with a question. When you are ready for the answer, you can press play. Oh, actually, if you finish answer, you can press play and check the answer. Here are the answers. Okay, so shape, positive x cubed. So we start from the bottom. When x equals 0, then y equals 1. When y equals 0, x equals minus a half. It's a triple root because you can tell it's a cube bracket cubed. So when we draw the graph, that will look like this. We linger around minus a half, then we continue go that in that direction. So minus a half, and the y-intercept is 1. That is the end of lesson. Well done.